Hello there, and welcome to the second episode of the Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 modding tutorial series. We'll be focusing in this episode on the very basics of how to texture assets for the game, and then how to get those back into the game once you've made a change to them. So the basic concepts of the file format for textures, how you convert them, make your changes, and then set it up correctly in your own mod so that it will work afterwards to preview them, and then obviously give them to people who want to share your mods. This will be very basic starting point for them, and then similar to the previous one, we'll go with more complex principles of textures in future videos. So what I'll do to get started, I'm just going to switch over to my game. And the main thing to be aware of for this, we'll be following a similar principle to a post that I'll put in the description from the wiki for Nexus mods, that was previously made in the very early days of the modding scene. We're basically trying to take the basket asset that's in the game already, show you where to find it, how to find it, and then how to make the changes to put it back in. So to get started, the asset you can find in most towns, to be honest, but if you're looking for a particular place to find it, in this case I'm in Troskowitz over here at the moment on the first map that you started. So what you want to do, you want to be in this sort of area, and if you, from here, just walk inside this little compound here, the basket we're looking for is this one, which, like I said, you can find it all over the game, but essentially it's there, or it's in this corner as well. So what we're going to try and do now is show you how to locate that in the game files, make a change, and we'll put it back to the game afterwards. So now we know what we're looking at and where you can find it quite easily. I'm going to go jump over to my game files. So I'm going to go into my Kingdom Come Deliverance game, and then into my data. And the problem you first have is trying to find the object textures and how you change them. So what comes in quite useful for this is one of the tools I showed off earlier in the last video. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my modding folder that I've got, and I'm going to use the KCD asset finder tool. So I'm just going to run past that. And this tool is quite useful because what you can essentially do is tell it what your game is, tell it the type of file you're looking for, what it might be called, if you've got a rough idea, search for it and try over time to narrow down what it's actually called. So in this case, the object we're looking for obviously is this basket, so usually start with a stencil bet and just try to search for basket. We can narrow it down straight away because we know it's going to be a texture, it's not going to be a material, it's not going to be a skin, it's not going to be geometry or anything like that. So I'm going to take it as a texture option, an asset type. I'm going to click search. And what you'll see is it's found quite a few different ones spread across the different pack files. I'm going to click expand all so you can see what they are. And essentially it's found basket A, DDA, diff. There's found all sorts of basket laundry files, basket rectangle, all sorts. Normally it's kind of a process of trial and error of take those out from your game, look at them, see if that's the one you're looking for. In this particular case, I know the one we're looking for is this basket underscore A, so I'm just going to narrow that down on the search. Do the same thing with expand all. And what we're looking for here is this basket A, DDNA file, all of those, and the diff files, the ones we're going to want. So I'm going to select those, and we can ignore essentially the logged ones because for now that's a more complex conversation for another video. So essentially I've identified the files I want, and now there's two ways I can get these out and work with them. The first way is to do it directly in this tool that we're already in here. So what you can do is if you click on the bottom here, you can put an export path in once you select the files you want, so just make sure you select all of the DDNA numbered ones in there, along with the diff for basket A. And then in export path, if you go into any folder, wherever you want to put those files. So for my case now, I'm just going to make a folder in here and call it example. And I'm just going to make a folder in there called input. And I'm going to select that as my path for the export. So you can choose preserve asset path. So what this will do, if you do that, it will keep all these sort of subfolders and make them automatically for you if you wanted to do that. I'm going to skip past that because we just don't need that. So what I'm going to do is click export selected, and it's going to tell me now that it's exported those 20 files that I had selected. So if I go into my folders and import, you can see they're all there now. Before we go into opening them, converting them, I'm just going to show you briefly the second way you can get them. So I'm just going to delete those for a moment. And the other way is, once you know where they are based off the tool, so I know now it's an IPL objects part 0. So all I'm going to do is go into IPL objects part 0 pack, which again, you can open that with WinRAR 7-zip, any sort of archive tool of your choice. So what I'm going to do now, you can see in here, the path is basically going to be the same as it shows here. So if I go into objects and then go into man-made and then go into common furniture, and then it's saying here it's in baskets. So I'm just going to go into there, and you can see all the files, including the ones that you'd hidden out in that list. I'd always suggest, personally, just out of preference, I tend to go this way and look in the pack files directly once you know where you're looking, just because it's a bit easier to find everything and see what you might have missed from searching it was too strict of a term. But so I'm going to do the same thing in principle of select all of those textures that I want. So I want all the DDNAs, I want all the diff files. So I've got those. I'm just going to drag those, similar to the extract, exact same principle, just drag those out. So that's the two ways you can do it. You can do it with the asset finder tool, or if you know where it is, you can just go into the pack file, drag it out directly, and either one works exactly the same. Just down to preference, quite honestly. Yeah, so now I've got those textures out. The first thing you'll notice is I can't really do much with them. If I try to open up this DDNA file now, it will try, but it will give me an error saying it can't read the data. And click on that, and you can see there, give me an error. Will not open the file. You'll get the same result in GIMP and the other kind of tools like that. So what we need to do is to get these into a format that we actually can work with correctly. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and separate a file here. I'm just going to go into my modding folder I always have, and I'm going to go to the KCD texture exporter tool that I told you guys for downloading in the last video as well. So what we're going to do, double click on that tool, give it a moment to open. Okay, now what I'm going to need to do is give it an input path of where the textures are that I want converted, and then an output path for it to put those textures to afterwards. The main thing to be aware of, it cannot do both of these with the same path. If you try that, it will just give you an error because the code won't handle it very well. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go back to my example folder. I've got an input. I'm just going to make an output just so I've got somewhere for it to go. Keep them separate for now. So I need to get the input into there and the output to there. So you can do that one of two ways. You can either click on the dots there, and then you can direct it to wherever you want to go to that. Or it also works if I click and drag the input folder, and you can just drag and drop it there to get the path. It's just down to preference, whichever way is easiest for you. As long as you end up with your correct input and output folders. The names don't matter at all, just name them whatever you want, whatever's easiest for you. Then the next thing we need to do is look at some of these options. So the first thing, this option here for separate gloss map, if you hover over it, it will explain it a bit. But essentially what it will do, the DDNA file, which is one of the files we have that we'll be converting, doesn't just have one texture type in there, it has two texture types that it will basically combine for the game to run and interpret correctly. But for us to be able to work with it and edit it, we need them separate if we're going to make those changes. So I'm just going to tick that to give you an example of how that looks. The second option you've got is to save a raw DDS. So what that will do is it'll take all the streamed files, it will convert them correctly give you a TIFF, but it can also give you a DDS copy, so a direct draw copy of the texture file to work with as well. For this case, I'm not going to bother because I just know I don't need that yet, because we'll convert them at the end anyway. You can choose to remember the past. If you're always working out the same folders, you can always just tick that, so it keeps that the same. Delete source files is basically just when it's converting, it will remove the folders from your input path, the files even from the input path, after it's done. Down to preference if you want to do that or not. Personally, I tend to, just because I know once I've converted them, I've got the output, I don't need the input there again necessarily. And then the last one there is include subfolders. So if you're working inside of a structure that has, let's say inside of your input, you have another folder in here called, let's say, test, and I put one texture in there, then I would need to drop it in there. So I know I've done that, so I would need to make sure I tick the include subfolders option so that it does that folder as well. But in this case, I know I'm not doing that, so I can basically ignore that process. So the main thing really is, if you're working with DDNA, make sure you separate the gloss map. The rest of it is all just preference for the majority of it. So what I'm going to do, I've got the input and the output there. I'm just going to click convert. And if you give it a moment, what you'll see now is it'll go through the input. And when you go to your output folder, what you'll end up with is the TIFF version of these files. So what we now have is 3 files out of the 2 DDS files that we had to work with. So the first one is this basket _a_diff. So in this context, diff refers to what we call a diffuse texture. So if you worked previously with any sort of textures of the game engine, you might have heard it called an albedo texture as well. It's the same thing in principle. Essentially, all this diffuse is a color map for the game. So this is essentially the colors for the object before the lighting engine gets to it, how it should look. So if you just want to recolor an object, for the most part, this is the first place to go and start doing that process of trying to make that change. And then the other files we've got to work with is the DDNA, and it also generates the alpha because I've ticked this separate gloss map option. So essentially, DDNA is, like I said earlier, 2 files combined. The first one is the normal map. Open up now to kind of show you what that looks like. But essentially, a normal map is just a way of presenting detail and depth on an object by using a 2D texture rather than having to put the detail into a 3D model. It's quite good for performance reasons to do it as a texture process rather than 3D model process. It saves you a lot on the polygons. If you're used to 3D modeling, you'll know what I'm talking about here, but if you're not, basically just think of it as kind of a way to kind of like do engravings and depth and sort of height, basically, to an object. So you can see in this context, with the way that Warhorse have used it, they've put all the bumps and weaves of the basket here into it, so there's a slight bump to it when you look at it in-game as well. So that's what they use it for, the first layer of the DDNA, the actual norm map that goes into it. And then the second one they give you is the gloss map texture. So essentially, as you would with anything that's glossy in real life, the idea of a gloss map is to use a grayscale texture to tell the game how to correctly kind of reflect light and make it shiny, essentially. It's grayscale, so essentially the darker something is, the less light and shiny it will be. The more towards the white scale it is, the more it should reflect light using the game's lighting system. And essentially what you would need to do is, when you're putting this back into game, you have to combine these 2 files back together so it knows it's actually all one file like the game expects it to be. But these are the 2 types of textures we've got to work with for what we're going to do. For this first one, we're going to keep it very, very basic, and we're just going to change the colour of the basket so you can see how that process works. So what I'm going to do, now I've got the diff open in Photoshop, all I'm going to do is apply a color change to the whole object. So quickest way for me to do that, just as a quick example, I'm just going to go to image and go to adjustments, which is somewhere. I'm blind. Oh, that's right. A moment. There you go. Image, and if I go to adjustments over here, and then I'm going to go to just color options down at the bottom. I can replace it, I can match colors. In this case, I'm just going to go to replace color. I'm going to select anywhere in the brown, as long as I'm in the right kind of region, really, that's what matters for this one. And all I'm going to do is change the color substantially enough that you can see that it's worked in game by the end of it. So in this case, I'm just going to go and try to make it a really random sort of color. So let's just pick something that looks utterly horrific so that it's a visible example. So I'm going to make it like this weird sort of bluish tinge to the color. So I'm just going to click OK on that. And in principle, it's all you should need to do to diffuse if you're just changing the color. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go to File and Save As. And what we want to do is just make sure you save it as a TIFF, again, like the original format. In this case, I'm just going to replace this one here that I'm working on at the moment that I got from the game. So I'm going to save that. These options for the TIFF, in most circumstances, you can basically leave these as default. The main thing to be cautious of is if you want transparency or not. If you do, leave it ticked. Otherwise, the rest of it should be fine. So I'm just going to click OK on that. Let that do its thing. Now that's saved. In this case, we're not going to touch the DDNA. We're going to leave those as they are. I just kind of talked previously just so you kind of have an idea of what they are in principle. But essentially, now that I've made that change and you can see the change has been made there, what we now need to do is get this file back into the game to make sure the change actually has worked. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close out of the game, so that's not running anymore. I'm just going to close the Photoshop file. And what we basically need to do now, first step, is to get this back to a .dds file so the game actually knows how to work with that format and the engine can read the texture, essentially. So in order to do that, what we need to do, I'm going to go to my modding tools folder from the one we installed in the previous video. Inside a KCD2 mod, we're going to go to Tools, and then looking for the folder called RC. So RC is the resource compiler, essentially. The tool that knows how to take a different format for models, textures, etc., and to put them back into the format that should actually work for the game to understand it correctly. So all I'm going to do, just so you can kind of see the concept of this, I've got RC over here, and I've got the file over here. So RC can work a couple of ways. It can work as a command line argument if you want to do it on batches. But just to keep things simple for this one, all I'm going to do is take this TIFF, drag it, and hover over the RC exe like this. And what happens when I let it go is it'll run RC with this texture. Give it a moment to do its thing. And when it's done, you should get a couple of things. First thing is this RC dependency. That's normal, that shows up. You don't need to keep it, so you can just delete that. It makes no difference. And then you can also see now it's giving me a _diff.dds file back. Because it's not streamed, I can now double click this and reopen it again in Photoshop to preview it. Which I would advise is a good idea to do, just to kind of see the file and make sure that it has converted correctly for resource compiler. So in this case that's worked, I know that has. The main thing to be conscious of when you're doing this process is that your file names are correct. Because essentially what RC does when it does its conversion is it reads your file, it goes, okay, here's the name. The only thing it's looking for is the suffix essentially here, so _diff, _ddna, and then all the other types of formats that we'll go into in future videos. It's looking for that ending of the file name, and based off that, that's how it interprets how it should convert the texture for you. If you want to see those in more detail, you can open up this rc.ini file over here, and you can see from this list, if you sort of go through it, should be for each of these. So you can see an example here. If it's _ddna, do this option. If it's terrain albedo is looking for, doesn't have one, but some of them, so decal should have opacity. You can kind of get an idea of what it's looking for, and essentially it tells it what format to make that texture into after it's done. So that's kind of a quick and easy place to go and look if you're trying to find what format names it's looking for. But in this example, we know what it is. It was already called diff. I've made the change, and now we've got the DDS texture. So what we now need to do is get this texture back into the game to work with it. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do, go into my Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and in here, if you've already played with any mods, you should have a mods folder. If not, you just want to create this folder here called mods. Make sure it's all lowercase and go into that. And what I'm going to do now is just create a folder for us to make our mod for the game to read it correctly. So what I'm going to do is just call this test_mod. Now, what we need to do is a couple of things. First thing is just to get this texture where the game expects to find it. So if you're replacing an asset like we're replacing a base game texture, what you need to do is make sure it's in this exact same path that the game expects it. So it should be in objects, man-made, common furniture, baskets. If it's anywhere else and you're replacing it, it won't know what it's replacing. It will just load the base game file, essentially. If you're doing your own custom items from scratch, you don't need to follow that rule, but if you're replacing stuff, always make sure it's in the same structure. So what I'm going to do, start off with, before we get into the objects, it expects a data folder like the base game has there, essentially. So what I'm going to do, create my folder called data in there. And what I'm going to do now, so now I've got the data folder, go into there, and what we now need to do is follow the rest of the path as it appears in there. So we need a folder called objects, and then man-made, etc. And you do basically to make each of those. So I'm going to carry on doing that. So I'm just going to make a new folder, call it objects, and then the next one is man-made, and then common, let's call furniture, and then baskets. The main thing I'd say beware when you're doing this is just triple check your spellings for no typos, that kind of stuff. I've been there before when I'm like, why isn't this working? And then I've realised I've put an S into furniture when I shouldn't have, or something like that. So always just be conscious of that and triple check that they look correct when you're done. But yeah, so now I'm in the right folder. I've copied it as per that sort of structure there. All I need to do now is take this DDS texture and drop that in there. So that's the texture side of it done. Then the next thing you should do if you want to share a mod, especially if you're doing a one for Steam Workshop or anything like that, is the game expects what we call a manifest file, which is essentially just kind of a summary XML document that tells the game what your mod is doing, why it's there, when it's created, who made it, that kind of key information. So just to kind of give you a best example of that, I'll put a link in the description to the Warhorse wiki page that they've made for kind of some level of modding documentation. And they've got a section here on the mod manifest which shows you the structure, what they should look like. So if you want to copy one, I'll put it into the description. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy that as a base to work with. I'm going to go into my test mod folder. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to create a new text document. And what you want to make sure is you change the whole thing, not just the name, including the format. I'm just going to call this mod.manifest. say it's going to be unusable possibly, that's fine, just click yes. Now what you want to do is open this up in your text editor choice. I'm going to be using VS Code. What we want to do is set up the same structure as is on this wiki page here. So I'm just going to paste that from here so you've got the structure to work with. And just so it's a bit easier to read, I'm just going to format it as XML so you can see kind of what it consists of. So essentially what we've got is an opening tag just to tell it that it's a mod. Then you've got an info section here, so this is all just kind of the high level information for the mod. So in this case, what's the sort of display name of the mod? The mod ID is like a unique name for your mod. Obviously description is just your free-form description or whatever you want to call it. Author's name, so who's making the mod. The version here is your version number for the mod you're making. And then you've got the created on is just the date you're putting the mod is made. Doesn't matter as much and for anything other than presentation for your own sanity, to be honest. That's sort of what you're looking for in that process. So that's the dates, and then further down here, under the support section, this essentially just tells the game what versions of the game to work with this mod with. So if you know you're making a mod that won't work with early versions of the game because it's relying on some content that wasn't added till later, for example, you can limit its use by making sure it'll only load if it's on the latest version of the game, essentially the one you've tested it on. So all I'm going to do to get started is just go through changing each of these to make sure it matches the mod we're making. So for the name, I'm going to go ahead and call this YouTube test mod. So that's just like this is just like the public display name, which will show if someone looks at it in the tools. Steam Workshop does use it as well, and then if I'm using mod loaders, etc., it will look for this manifest file to see the name of the folder as well. Same I think with Vortex. So you'll just make sure that it's a useful, clear name for your mod. The mod ID is a bit more restrictive. It needs to be all in lowercase. It needs to have no spaces or special characters. It can just be text, essentially, with no spaces. So if you want to use a space, like this example here, you use an underscore, for example. So what I'm going to do, and what you should do as a rule of thumb, is make sure your mod ID is the same as your mod folder name you've created, just so there are a couple of edge cases where it has to be the same if you're using certain type of scripts, etc. So for simplicity's sake, as a rule of thumb, just stick to doing that process. So all I'm going to do is change my mod ID here to call it the same as my folder, so test_mod. Using a test_mod in the ID. The description is, again, just presentation to the user, what you want to call it. So to give it a brief description, say, this adds an example texture, just so it summarizes what it's doing. Author's name, put my username in there. Version, as long as it's numbers, not characters, it's not too fussy. So you can number this whatever you want. For this, I'm just going to call this, keep this as it is, sorry, 0.1. I'm not going to change that because I don't need to. The created on is the creation date of the mod, like I said earlier. The main thing to be aware of, the format of this has to be in year, then in the month, and then the day. So essentially the American format for the date, rather than the European day, month, other way around. If you do it the wrong way around, certain mod loaders might have a problem with it. And if you try to use some of the mod tools later on, like SMID, etc., they will fail to load because the dates are incorrect as it expects them to be. So in this particular example, all I'm going to do is change it to today's date. So it is the 6th month, so it should be 6. And today's date is the 23rd of June, so 23rd of the 6th, 2025. So if you're European, just think about doing it backwards, essentially. The support, in this context, it will support any version, so all I'm going to do for this is just remove the alpha option. And what you can do for the version is you can have specify a certain one like this, like you can say, oh, it'll work for anything that's 1.1, and then if there's like a small patch, like a 1.1.5, this asterisk just essentially means that it will run on any subversion of 1.1, essentially. In this particular context, I know at the moment the game's on, I think, 1.3, so what I want to do is make sure it does load on the latest version. Because I know I'm not too concerned about it having incompatibility issues with early versions of the game, all I'm going to do is change that to an asterisk and another asterisk. So essentially what I'm saying here is, as long as the major version of the game is 1 point something, it will load regardless. So I've done that. Make that save change, so save the file. Now the next thing I need to do is to pack my mod so that it loads into the game. So all I'm going to do, I'm going to use the pack tool we downloaded in the previous video to do that. So I'm just going to right click on my mod folder, and as long as it's got the manifest file, which is why I've done that again just so it detects it, is when I right click on my folder, it will give me this pack mods option down here. So I'm just going to click on that. And what you'll essentially see now is it's mod ID, so it's read my mod ID from there correctly. The input and the output are going to be the same in this context, that's fine. And all it's saying now is it's gone in the data, it's found contents, so it's made a pack file, and it's taken my mod ID as the name of that pack file. So that's all fine, we know it's packed correctly, it's not giving us any errors, so it should, in theory, work in the game now. So once that's done, you can press any key to close out of that window, give it a second, and then it will close out of that. So now what we need to do is to load the game to test that file. So I'm going to go and launch my main game. And that's going to take a slight moment for me, so I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be back once my game has fully loaded. Okay, so now the game's loaded, we're back in the same place we were in earlier. All I'm going to do is walk back inside to where those baskets are, and you can see straight away the colour has changed on these baskets. Obviously we didn't make a full in-depth colour change to it, if like full blue. We kept the tinges of brown on the edges of it, so you can see it's kept those as well. But that's just a very quick and dirty example of making a texture change to an existing item in the game. It can be that simple if you want to make a quick change like that. There will be much more complex explanations in different types of textures, different objects in the game, whether that be a person's clothing, shields, all that kind of stuff, weapons. They each have their own complexity, but this is just a very quick and dirty example of how to do something very quick, easy, and measurable from start to finish. See the change, get used to your mod structure, doing a mod manifest, that kind of stuff, so that you can take this loading from this video into the next one and hopefully come away with better understanding each time and slowly build upon your knowledge and get better as you build it all up. So yes, thank you very much for watching, guys. Please do subscribe and leave comments of any questions you do have, or feel free to join the modding Discord, which again, link will be in the description to the modding Discord to join that one. The next video will be showing the very, very basics of 3D model export, so getting a model from the game, seeing it in Blender, possibly making a couple of quick small changes to it. Again, similar thing of seeing the result of that change. And then we'll build upon the next videos on that and how to actually make your own custom content, both textures and model-wise at the same time. So do subscribe if you want to see some of that more in-depth content that will be coming soon once you get this basic stuff out of the way. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. Peace and love, and I'll see you around.
Henry, let's drink to Henry. He gets the job done the best he can. Yeah!